Hey everyone, I'm Kristen Jensen. I am the founder of Defend Young Minds. And today I am really excited to have Dr. Donald L. Hilton Jr. with us. He's going to talk with us and answer questions about virtual reality and how it affects the growing brain of children, how it can be such a strong influence. We need to kind of go through this and be cautious as we have this new technology at our disposal. So I know this is going to be really interesting to parents out there. This technology is here and it's not going away anytime soon. So it's really good for us to learn all we can about it. Now, I'm just going to introduce Dr. Hilton. He is a board certified neurosurgeon in San Antonio, Texas. He has previously served as an adjunct associate professor of neurosurgery at the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio, and as the director of the Spine Fellowship and the director of neurosurgical training at the Methodist Hospital. So he's currently serving as vice chief of staff at Stone Oak Methodist Hospital. And he has almost 30 years, almost 3 decades of surgery experience, neurosurgery experience. And he's done so much work outside of his neurosurgery. He has authored peer-reviewed journal articles and book chapters on addiction. So he's well known throughout the world on addiction. He's published academic, psychiatric textbook articles. He's also served on the board of directors of the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, and he served on the board of the Society for the Advancement of Sexual Health. So he's spoken at numerous symposiums and forums on pornography, as you know, showing how pornography is a public health issue in the United States and internationally. So he's testified in congressional hearings in the U.S. Capitol building. He's spoken at a symposium in the Polish Parliament building in Warsaw and the Vatican Conference in 2017. So he's just had so much experience, and we are just so privileged to have him with us today to talk with us about the virtual reality and its effect on the brain. So welcome, Dr. Hilton. Thank you so much.
It's good to be with you, Kristen.
All right, well, let's get into it. What does the research say about children, maybe even teenagers or younger, using VR headsets? Are there any concerns at all that anyone has raised out there in the academic world or in the medical world?
There, to my knowledge, and I've just done a cursory search of the literature, there's not a lot of research on children using VR sets. In fact, there's a lot of caution. Some of the VR makers are even recommending that young children not use the sets at this point. There's warnings for under 13, given the whole issue of even the internet and what that does with social media, for instance, to children, to the developing brain. Mm-hmm. So even with adults, there's not a lot of research on VR and what that does. There is an interesting article that came out recently, though, published in Computers in Human It's a journal called Computers in Human Behavior. Mm-hmm. And the title of it, interestingly, is Virtual Reality Induces Symptoms of Depersonalization and Derealization, a longitudinal randomized controlled trial. This was not a VR pornography study. This was looking at VR gaming and just, other, mainly VR gaming. And it's interesting that it's called...
So what is this depersonalization and could you explain those terms?
Sure, DP, and it's the acronym for it is DP and then DR, or it's kind of thrown together. And this is, again, I'm learning as I DPDR. In other words, depersonalization, derealization, DPDR. And DPDR is essentially defined as being in kind of a matrix type world that's not real, to the point where the person actually feels that they're part of that medium and they are separated in a sense from the real world. The virtual world kind of becomes the real world, and there's a blurring of what is real. The brain is tricked into thinking they do live in this second life kind of virtual matrix type world. And so it's an interesting article. This was actually published in June of 22. It just came out a couple of months ago. Just if you want to get a screenshot, anyone, of this
Oh, yeah.
here.
So is this a problem?
Yeah, and basically the summary, and I won't take time to go through the whole study, but the summary was that there can be, that they didn't find, and this was a longitudinal study, they didn't say that it necessarily, they can show based on this study that it induces long-term deficits at this point. So, but what they are saying is that there's certainly people subjectively saying that they feel. So they basically call for more study. But just to kind of read their intro into their abstract, they say, trusting reports on internet forums, a substantial number of people who've developed unpleasant symptoms of depersonalization, derealization after virtual reality consumption. Their study on this one, this initial study, says, well, we can't show objectively that there's long-term harm, but this is, again, what's long-term? This is all new. But there is a concern. So I think this is an interesting study, not necessarily in it giving us long-term results, but just saying that it's enough of a question and enough people that they did a study about people complaining of depersonalization, derealization from just gaming.
Yeah.
Enough of an alarm bell that they did this study. There's several other studies, and these are mainly in the journal Computers and Human Behavior.
Okay.
And one of them, for instance, again, there's not a lot on this. This is kind of new in terms of people looking at this. The impact of immersion on the perception of pornography, a virtual reality study. And in their summary, it thus appears experiencing pornographic video stimuli in high immersive virtual environments increases the experience of presence as well as sexual related perception. So not surprisingly, common sense would say that it should be a more immersive experience sexually to be in a VR world than to be on just a computer screen in 2D.
2D screen.
It makes sense, but anyway, that's what they confirmed in their study. Another study, clearly the abstract, clearly the immersive capabilities of technology are not the only and likely not the strongest predictors of sexual arousal. And so, but they say it tempers that there is concerns that it could exacerbate compulsive pornography consumption. They say maybe it's tempered by the fact that does it really immerse completely, but there's the concern again. So these are early studies. We don't have a lot in terms of telling us, wow, this is dangerous. This other one, though, says basically that, and it's a study on the global market of VR porn and how it's essentially going to become a major market force in the technology world, and that up to 60% of all VR programs now are pornographic. If you think about gaming being, say, 40, gaming and other things being 40% or less, and porn is already 60% of what's being developed for VR porn, which goes back when Oculus was purchased by Meta, which is Facebook's parent company. The owner of Oculus said somewhat sarcastically that really everyone felt that VR would drive the Oculus headset, VR pornography would drive it. But when you ask people in the forums, in the mainstream business world, they'll say, oh, VR porn, what's that? And then he said sarcastically, but behind the scenes, they were depending on VR porn to drive VR technology such as Oculus. So it's definitely, as you mentioned in your opening, Kristen, going to increase. So I think the question we have to all ask ourselves is, clearly it's more immersive. It's clearly a different world where there's early studies. People are starting to look at virtual pornography gaming and pornography and ask questions about depersonalization, derealization. So what does that mean for us? You know, what do we do with our children? Do we all go out and buy VR headsets and let them sit around? So that's
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Well,
that's a rhetorical question. I have some thoughts on it.
yeah, and we're going to get to that. And you already mentioned that VR definitely enhances the experience. It's more immersive. We feel like we're in that world to a greater degree, that it's actually causing people to feel like that blurring, you know, was I doing this in the VR? Was I doing this in real life? You know, and having that blurring. So I would think that that is troubling and that that could be a problem, especially with children, especially younger children who already, you know, fantasy and reality can be blurred with young children. So again, you know, we're just trying to keep up with what's happening and what we know now. There's going to be a lot happening in the next few years, and we just want to be on top of it. So let's just talk a little bit about even just a game that has violence in it. Is that going to traumatize a child more if it's VR? Or if it's, you know, just a straight, you know, game on a screen?
So I don't think there's any question about it. But as we've said, I read a few studies which don't really tell us much yet, but they just show that the questions are being asked. Now, having said that, my wife and I have had one experience with virtual reality. We were at a conference. You may have been there, Kristen. It was a conference about addressing the pornography problem. I spoke at it. I think you might have as well. I'm not sure. I don't remember if you were there, but they had someone there, and it was a VR demonstration where you put a headset on. And what happened is there was this girl who had been trafficked, and she interviewed. She told what happened, not in graphic detail, but she just explained how she had been stolen from her family. And this was down in, I think, in South America. And so you put this headset on, and she told you her experience. And literally you're standing in this room with her telling you the story. And it was surreal. It was like she was 3D. You felt like you could reach out and shake her hand. And then you look to your left and there was a window, and you looked out, and in the street, you could see things going on out in the street. And you look to your right, you could turn around and look at the wall behind you. It was absolutely amazing. I remember Jan and I both did it, and we were just, and she just, it was so real. You know, almost brought you to tears when she told this terrible story, what happened to her. The only thing was, when I looked down and I didn't have any feet. I didn't exist. I looked for my body, and my body, of course, wasn't there. So that was where there was a big difference with the real world and the VR world. But it was pretty dramatic. It was pretty remarkable, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I don't want to say that all VR is bad. I mean, VR is technology. It just is, and we can use it for good. And I know there are going to be many good uses for VR, but we have to also be cautious. And I do know we got a VR headset just to check it out, one of the very early ones. And my daughter, who was in college at the time, she was using it, but she has a little bit of an eye issue. She had like a lazy eye, and so it made her nauseated to use it. There are going to be some people that just can't, because it will, you know, it just, or maybe they'll get better at it. But, well, so I think that answers the question, because it is such an impactful experience that anything that's happening there is going to trick the brain even more. It's going to make the brain feel, I mean, as it is, when you're watching a movie and you get to a really suspenseful part and scary or whatever, you can feel your heart rate going up. So your brain thinks it's in a dangerous situation just with a flat screen. Imagine how much more it's going to react when it's got the whole VR and feels like it's right there. So again, I would caution parents, and I think you probably would, for being careful with using this this technology on young children. Now, in terms of using VR with pornography, you mentioned that 60% of VR material out there is pornography right now. So we can see that that industry is taking advantage of this new technology and driving it. And I think you seem to believe that, you know, we need more studies, but that it could even be more addicting than just, again, pornography on a flat screen, because it is so much more immersive. That makes sense, but we'll have to wait for the science, right, to get there, right?
Well, I guess let me handle that this way. So, and my reference for that, by the way, is an article a couple of years ago in Insider magazine, 2019. Why people use virtual reality porn, what psychologists think. That's the title of that, if you want to go look that up. And that's where they say that an estimated 60% of the top virtual reality websites are porn sites, which means VR adult entertainment's big business, and that's expected to increase. And then there's two others, and just in looking at different sites, again, this is, what does data mean on this? We don't know for sure, but one, LA Times had an article, I think they estimated 50% of everyone with headsets uses it for porn. And another one said 78% of men that have headsets will use it for porn. Again, these were not, show me your reference. They really couldn't do that, but still, most people are saying that VR headsets are going to be used for porn in many cases. We personally know a man who's in his 40s who purchased a VR headset, and his 15, 16-year-old son accessed it at least once and perhaps twice for VR porn. And he had no idea. And later the young man came out. And of course, teenagers are savvy now. So he had already accessed it. The thing to remember too is that VR, the way it's filmed with multiple cameras to give reality, and it's filmed from a point of view perspective. In other words, typically male point of view perspective, although I'm sure to meet the increasing demand for female centered pornography, that will also be varied to catch that viewership as well. But with this point of view, really focusing on the males right now, essentially the male, when they film, the male pornography performer, the camera is filmed from that vantage point. And so the person literally has the impression that they're having actual sexual relations with this female performer. So they become almost an avatar in this, right, in this virtual world. So to say that it's going to be more immersive and wait for science, I personally don't need to wait for that. To me, just with what I know about the brain, about human physiology, it's, and everyone that's used it, people on forums that are trying to quit pornography have said that this is way harder for them. One of them said he wishes he'd never seen VR, that compared to conventional pornography, it's just much more difficult for him to think about stopping in terms of the impact on his reward system. Just for perspective, I like to think of it this way. So William Halsted is the father of American surgery. And he trained Harvey Cushing, who is the father of my field of neurosurgery. This is 100 years ago, 120 years ago. First at Johns Hopkins, then Cushing went on to Harvard. But Halsted, where he essentially pioneered modern surgery at Johns Hopkins, his residents that he trained essentially established different fields of medicine. So he's a real pioneer. Mm-hmm. While he was pioneering medicine, he found that you could put a solution in the eye to operate on someone's eye that would anesthetize it and allow you to do surgery, which before, you can imagine how painful it was to operate on someone's eye without anesthesia. Well, this is a cane solution like lidocaine. Well, this was cocaine. So cocaine solution they would put in the eye, and it didn't make you high, it just numbed your eye. And mm-hmm. Cocaine solutions are still used today in ophthalmology. Yeah. But they found, this was brand new, this was new technology. And they found, wow, guess what? When you're off and you're not doing surgery, you can take a whiff of this stuff or use it, and it gives you a real buzz.
Mhm.
And it's harmless. It's just a nice buzz. So William Halsted became addicted to cocaine before they even knew that it was addictive at that point. So they treated his addiction to cocaine with morphine.
Mm.
So he had a double addiction, and there's a fascinating book about it. He still developed surgery, even though he struggled with these addictions throughout his career. And I think this is similar. This VR technology, cocaine, drugs have uses that are I think wonderful in medicine and applications that bless our lives, right?
Mhm.
But VR headsets, they're used for simulation and flight training. They're doing some surgical simulations. Look, VR is going to be fantastic, but it's powerful. It's powerful technology, and it's new. And to just think we can essentially create this reward system, this reward system trap, so to speak, that will be designed to be maximally captivating
Mhm.
to our eyes and our brains, and that we can then walk away from that when it's been designed specifically to capture us. I think
Right.
it's naive.
Right. It is. It is. We really have to respect the power of virtual reality, virtual reality. We, as parents, as grandparents, it's important for us to be cautious when we are introducing this to our children. And so you said, let's just wrap this up with, you said you had some of your own thoughts about kids and VR. So spill it. Let's hear what you, what would, what
I
in
think
your
it needs,
own mind, in your
yeah,
own mind.
I think we need to be very cautious with children in VR, just as we're cautious with gaming, right? With emerging adults or children, emerging adults, teenagers. They literally will. They don't have a stop button. It's like, do you want broccoli or do you want, high sugar? And they're going to choose the high sugar. And this is really high sugar and for their brain in a sense. And I think we need to be very, very cautious about VR with children, particularly VR headsets. If, for instance, even an adult man has struggled with pornography and he has a VR headset, then it's going to be very tempting for this person to use it for VR applications. And when they do, it's a pleasure reward that they won't easily forget.
Yeah.
And the curiosity will definitely cause that cat to go back for more, so to speak, and can kill the cat. So I just think it needs to be understood that this is really powerful technology. There's going to be obviously some great things to use, but it needs to be respected, just as we don't leave loaded guns laying around. VR pornography, VR headsets, and VR technology needs to be, I think, given the respect that it's due, given the dangers inherent.
Yeah. And I think some kids are going to be more, parents already can see, they already have a problem with screen time. They already have a problem disengaging just from a flat screen. And if your kids already have a problem with that, then you may want to hold off on VR until they're much more mature and have that thinking brain developed quite a bit more. So, well, Dr. Hilton, thank you so much for being with us and for explaining some of the research and bringing up some of these points about VR and expressing how powerful it really is and how powerful it can be. And of course, we're not here to tell any parent what to do, but we are here to provide some educated opinions, I guess, and some good information. So thank you so much. And we look forward to talking with you again sometime on other topics. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.